Moon hoax believer and prolific maker of hoax videos Hunchbacked has previously pushed one very ignorant conspiracy theory. Not the broad aspect that he believes that we didn't go to the moon, but rather something that pertains to orbital mechanics, a very specific interest of mine. I decided to take a few moments to debunk this particular claim. There are a number of photos taken on the Apollo missions which show the command and service module below the lunar module while in lunar orbit. These particular photos were taken before the LM had performed any burns with the DIPS engine. The only thrust that has been applied is the CSM's translational thrust to back away from the LM for its maneuvers, and the LM's rotational thrust to change its attitude on orbit. Most would believe that because the LM was landing on the moon, and thus descending away from the CSM, that it should stand to reason that the LM would be below the CSM. However, orbital mechanics is a bit more tricky than that. Orbital mechanics teaches us that applying thrust in the retrograde direction results in a loss of velocity which causes a vessel to drop its periapsis altitude or the altitude of its lowest point in the orbit. In these photos, what has happened is that the CSM has released the LM into orbit during the undocking maneuver while the CSM was pointing prograde, or facing along its direction of travel. As the CSM backed away using its thrusters, it dropped the altitude of its periapsis. Because as we know, for every action there must be an equal and opposite reaction, the LM has also received a boost in the prograde direction, which teaches us that the highest point in its orbit, the apoapsis, or in the moon's particular case, the apocynthion, will actually gain altitude. Without performing any further burns, the LM would certainly rise above the CSM, as its orbit had been given a slight boost. This was especially prominent on Apollo 11, when there was a small amount of air still in the docking tunnel during undocking, causing a form of propellant for the two vessels. But don't simply take my word for it. This is the Spaceflight Simulator Orbiter 2010. Here I am in orbit with the CSM and the LM around the moon. Watch as I separate the two vessels with the CSM pointing prograde and then speed up time to display the effects. Now true, the LM had to descend to the moon, but after there was a good distance between the two vessels, the LM performed a retrograde burn at 10% called the Descent Orbit Insertion, or DOI, which lowered its pericynthion over the landing site to approximately 15 kilometers. Closer to that mark, the LM's DPS engine ignited again for the Powered Descent Initiation, or PDI burn. There is no great conspiracy here, Hunchbacked, merely your misunderstanding of orbital mechanics.